Welcome to season 2012. It's round 2 and Sydney host Fremantle for their first home game of the season at the SCG. Fremantle were irrepressible in their first game of the season, narrowly edging Geelong in a spiteful home match. The Swans, they torched the young Giants and sit pretty at the top of the ladder. Sydney are premiers. It's a retrospective podcast brought to you by the Swans Blog. We cast our gaze across the 2012 season and ultimately over one of the greatest grand finals of our modern era. Grab a beer or a glass of wine, kick back and enjoy the season in review. Your hosts for this episode are Swanscast regulars, Justin and Joshua. Joshua, thank you so much for joining me for this round 2 episode.
No problems. Anything to distract me from the real world?
Yes, the real world at the moment isn't looking that flash, is it?
Nope, it's garbage.
Well, I'll tell you what does look a lot more flash than the real world at the moment, and that is our result in the 2012 round 2 match against Fremantle.
Well, how about just the result in 2012 in general? But we'll get to that later.
Yes. Well, it can't go too far from that. I mean, it was one of the better years that we've had for a long, long time.
Amazing.
These podcasts, they certainly make up for the lack of football that we're experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, well, it forces me to watch old games, which I'd forgotten about. So I won't get too much into that because we did that last week. But it's been nice watching some of the old favourites run around on the paddock, that's for sure.
I'll tell you the one thing it has made me realise is just how good some of these players really were. And just the change they had over just a span of 2 or maybe even 3 seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one, like, I know we probably talked about him last week, but Kieran Jack.
Oh, yeah.
Like my mind remembers that Kieran Jack was a hard nut gun midfielder, but I forgot just how good he was till we started watching these games.
Oh, yeah. How about Craig Bird? He was shifted on to
Birdie.
Essendon, and he just looked horrendous at Essendon, ended up retiring pretty early on in his career. I think he was roughly like 29, 30 years old. But how good did he look back in 2012?
He looked amazing in 2012. Lewis Jetta, brilliant in 2012. And even though it's his last season, Jude Bolton could have gone for a couple more years. He would have been just fine out there.
Yeah.
Benny McGlynn. I see Tommy Papley's like an upgraded Benny McGlynn, but I'd forgotten how much I like to watch Benny McGlynn play as well. It's been such a good experience rewatching this season.
It has.
And that's excluding watching the grand final as well. It's been so good.
We've seen the emergence of Sam Reid as well, and he has been really good the first couple of matches. It's still pretty funny watching LIT in the forward line. He just looks so unco and fish out of water, really. It's not his natural
He looks like
position.
an octopus.
He does.
He looks like an octopus. It's like he can't control where his arms are going. It's a bit weird.
And it was pretty funny in the commentary. One of the commentators mentioned that he's all arms and legs when he's playing anyway. And that's just exactly how he looks. He just looks all over the shop, but he just gets the job done no matter what.
Yep. This was the first time this season we saw Gary Rowan play a game as well.
Yep.
And I'd have to say, I think this is going to prove my point that he showed a lot of promise up until the leg fracture and then the hamstring. And I don't think he ever recaptured what he had. He looked a lot more solid in this game than I remember watching him over the last 3 seasons he played with us.
Yeah.
Just one of those terrible things, I guess, that he never quite got to where he could have been.
Yeah, and there's a number of players that we sort of see with that. Like, we've got Mark Seaby, who's come in from the Eagles. He's sort of thrown in because Mumford's unavailable, Pike's not available yet. And I mean, we'll see the dramatic rise of Mike Pike through the season and into the finals. Like, Collingwood lauded. You could look at Big Cox, but he hasn't had the impact that Mike Pike has had.
No, certainly not. And I think and I thought back then that if Mike Pike had played for another team in Vic, he probably would have got a lot more respect. And like, one of the things for Mike Pike is that he pulls out one of the best quarters of football you'll ever see from a Canadian in the grand final.
Just anyone, really.
And just for anyone, really. But people forget he was the second best contested mark winner for either 2012 or 2013, and he was second to Travis Cloke, who was he couldn't kick for goal, but he was an amazing contested mark. He really was.
Well, I mean, if you had a shot 50 metres out, it was like almost 100% chance of nailing it. If you had a set shot 10 metres out, he was about 0% chance. I think he was like 1 from 25 directly in front.
Yeah, that's right. I think Joe Danaher's a little bit like that as well. You want him at 55 metres, not at 5 metres.
Yeah.
Just watching some of these guys run around again for the first time in ages has just been awesome to watch.
It has been. And it's just really, like, we watched some of even the opposition teams. Fremantle, for example, Adam McPhee. Like, some of these players you just completely forget about. Adam McPhee, Ryan Crowley, McFarlane, you just forget how good McFarlane was. It's amazing watching it again 8 years on when you...
Chris Mayne.
Yeah, Chris Mayne, when you can really just look at the match with a different lens and a different perspective. Yeah. Almost like a neutral watching it.
Yeah, and Chris Mayne's at Collingwood now, but I don't think he's a shadow of the player he was with Freo. He's still got the same mullet, though. He's still got the same hairstyle. In fact, I think it was better then than it is now.
Yeah.
Who else was there? Aaron Sandilands.
Yeah, he was amazing.
I mean, he was amazing. Or Nat Fyfe. Like, I think I said to you in the middle of the game, just watching this game, you wouldn't think this guy, like, you could tell he was going to be a great player, but you wouldn't have said in 2012 this guy was going to be a dual Brownlow medalist.
No. I mean, he was on the rise. It was a good first breakout season, and you could certainly see the quality was there.
Oh, but he's still a skinny, weedy kid, though, with a head that's not big enough to match his body. Do you know what I mean? Like, you just look at him, you go, if I didn't know that what you would become, there's no way I would have thought you would become that after this game.
Let's have a look at the Fremantle team real quick, and then we'll have a look at the Sydney team as well real quick. John Anthony came from Collingwood, had a reasonable start at Fremantle, but really didn't go on with it. Barlow, he's finished up. Kepler Bradley, he was one of those really strange stories. He came from Essendon originally as a forward, had a terrible run of injuries, played 20 or 30 games at Essendon over about 6 or 7 years. Just couldn't get in the side. And even when he was in the side, just looked absolutely horrendous.
Nick Subban.
Yeah, Subban.
Nick Suburban, as Freo Dokers likes to call him, Nick Suburban.
Zach Clark, I don't think I've ever seen a player get worse with age. I mean, he was pretty ordinary then, but he is bloody awful now.
He had a shocking game, this one too. I don't know what Ross the Boss saw in that guy, but he kept him around forever. Joshua Mellington,
God.
I can't remember him at all, but every time the name Mellington got said on the call, I got confused for a second. I'm like, Mellican, what?
Yeah. Tendai Mzungu ended up at GWS.
Matt De Boer
at GWS, he played well as well. So
he's a much better player now than he was then, though.
Yeah.
Like, he became a much better player at the Giants. The one that I really liked from this game from Freo, though, was Matthew Pavlich. I forgot how awesome he can be. And there's just something about the way he's built physically as well. He just looks like such an impressive unit.
Well, he's not that different from Adam Goodes, and they both played that prototype midfielder / forward kind of role. But Pavlich was just as good as a midfielder as he was a forward.
Yeah, I think it's that sort of weird cut, chiseled, square jaw he's kind of got as well. Like, he just looks like a complete unit.
Yeah.
And he can play. Like, I forgot how well he can play.
He was solid. He was a very solid unit. Very athletic, very quick. Very good overhead at knees. Great contested mark and a very, very good set shot. He was an all-round excellent player. And he would fit into every single team. Every team in the AFL would have been desperate to have him.
Complete package. And he still had fuel in the tank when he retired as well. He could have kept going. He was good enough to keep playing.
Well,
whether he could physically stand up.
He can. At that point he probably could have, but he's still got plenty of fuel in the tank when he's on Fox Footy and he's getting stuck into the into the guys and the commentary team and having a bit of fun. It's always good. It is great to watch Pavlich come on because he's got a pretty good sense of humour. So he's not one of those sort of boring, dry old footballers. He's a quality unit and he was a very, very good player. So yeah, it was great to watch him. But Luke McFarlane, I forgot how good he was.
Yeah.
And Michael Johnson, he was always good. But there was that one particular moment in the third quarter when he had this moment that I think Paul Roos described as just horrendous.
He had 5 or 6 minutes where he just went missing with the fairies and he put zero pressure on it all. And the commentators lost their minds over it.
Yeah.
Lost their minds over it. And to be fair, and to be quite frank, actually, if he had have put some pressure on, I think I know the incident you're talking about. Paul Roos was right into him over it. If he had put some pressure and made that tackle, Sydney may actually lose this game.
Yep. It was one of the goals that we got back to kick ahead. There was that
That's right.
massive chase down on McPhee, which we'll get into later, which ended up with a goal. But there was just moments there, those 1% moments that Sydney did all the right things and Fremantle they couldn't get any of the things going their direction.
Nope.
But
no, they couldn't.
Before we talk about the match, we're going to go through an AFL round review. Then we're going to discuss the match review panel findings from round 1. So we're just going to talk about the other 8 matches that happened that week. And there were some absolute horror shows from some of the teams. Carlton absolutely smashed the Lions by 91 points. And Josh, the amazing thing from round 2, only one away team won. All the other winners were home teams.
Oh, really?
Yep,
wow.
Every team other than Carlton were home.
Yeah, but look at who 2 of these away teams are as well.
Yeah, it's no surprise. There was a fairly interesting game between Port Adelaide and Essendon. Port Adelaide came back at Essendon in the third quarter. They were threatening, but Essendon just smashed them in the last quarter to win by 25 points. Our game, which we're going to cover later, could have been more, should have been more. But the West Coast pumped Melbourne, and this is when Melbourne were at their absolute worst. They smashed them by 108, and it wasn't even the biggest victory of the round or the highest score either, which is shambolic. Adelaide, they beat the Western Bulldogs by 18 points. They had a bit of a three-quarter time scare when the Dogs came from 4 goals down to be 2 points down. Then we had Collingwood beat Richmond by 21, and this is when Richmond were sort of starting to improve a little bit. Then we had North Melbourne put on a absolute monster show, 183 points. So that's like one of the highest scores for a very long time. They won by 129 points over GWS, and it's one of their biggest margins for a long time, and their biggest since 1996. St Kilda flogged the Suns by 92 points. Then we also had Geelong, who won by 2 points over Hawthorn, and they had to have a bit of a last quarter comeback on that one. They kicked 4 goals, 1 to 5 behinds. Podsy Ardley, if you can believe it. Podsy Ardley had a day out to remember. He had a big second half. He kicked 3. He kicked the last 3 goals of the match.
I hope that when we play the Cats later on this season, that Pods is in that game, because I always quite like watching Pods play.
He's an interesting player to watch. I don't know how you describe him. He's not really that much of a contested player, although he has the physical size and the strength to be a contested player. But he was a player who loved to get on the lead as well.
Yeah.
But he was just such an odd kind of player to watch. He'd have these blinders, and then other weeks he'd just be pretty ordinary, if not just outright bad. But he finished that match with 5 goals.
Well, you can be outright bad and outright good on occasion as well, can't you? So. Yeah,
exactly. And can you believe it? Right, he kicked 5 goals, and he didn't even end up in the Brownlow votes.
Ripped off. Would you only touch the ball 5 times?
No, 15 disposals, right?
Yeah.
But 6 clears. 7 of them are contested. He had 3 contested marks, 4 of them and he had 4 marks inside 50s and 4 1%ers, right? And it was Tom Hawkins who got the 1 Brownlow vote. But I mean, in his defence, he had 3 goals and 22 disposals, and an absolutely epic game. 8 marks inside forward 50.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's the AFL round in review. Josh, you've got some MRP findings from round 1.
Oh, mate, this is going to be my favourite bit here because of the first bloke that's mentioned. So the guy who had the most punchable face in the AFL, who then handed that award off to Toby Green, that would be the one Hayden Ballantyne.
Yes.
Hayden Ballantyne got 2 weeks for elbowing Chapman, or Chappie, from the Cats in the guts, 50, 60, 70 metres off the ball, laid Chapman out on the ground, got 2 weeks for, yeah, no, I would, nah, it wasn't quite that bad. It was,
was it
probably
considered in play? It's probably too far off the ball for that.
I think the Stevie J hit that we looked at earlier was far closer to Barry Hall than the Ballantyne one, but it was certainly a long way off the ball, and he got 2 weeks for an intentional strike with medium impact.
Yep.
Later on in the same game, Matty Scarlett gets into an argument with Hayden Ballantyne down in the goal square, and clocks Ballantyne on the chin. So Matty Scarlett got a better bloke couldn't have been thumped on the chin than Hayden Ballantyne, but Matty Scarlett got 3 weeks as well. So it's a pretty spiteful game.
It was, and in the end, Fremantle won by 4 points. That because what happened was Fremantle kicked the goal, right? And then Scarlett gave away the free kick after the goal was kicked. So Ballantyne got a free kick to kick another goal.
Yeah.
And that was to go 2 goals up in the third quarter.
Yep.
The funny thing about that particular incident is Mzungu, he's in the vicinity, and Scarlett clocks Ballantyne, and Ballantyne doesn't really react until Mzungu sort of strolls up. It's about half a second to a second between the connection, and when Mzungu basically pushes Ballantyne a little bit, and Ballantyne just flops on the ground like a proper throws his head back, throws his body back. And we're looking at the video having a laugh because we're saying there's more chance of him getting concussion from that massive flop than there is from the fist connecting with the jaw in the first place.
Yeah, he went down like a shot cat, didn't he?
Oh, he did.
Yeah, but you're right. The impact with the ground was bigger than the impact that Matty Scarlett landed on his chin. And I don't think Matty Scarlett actually went for a full-blooded thump as well. He went to probably it's either like a jumper punch or like even a push off with his fist clenched, but with the underside of his hand, and he just happened to touch him on the chin on the way through. But Ballantyne put the mayo on, and Scarlett got 3 weeks. Yeah,
it was a pretty funny incident, but. Look, Fremantle won that match. We're talking about Geelong, who were the reigning premiers, one of the best teams of probably the last 20 years. After that 2011 season, comparisons were made between the Geelong team from 2011 and the Essendon team from 2000, who would win. Even commentators and pundits got involved in this. It was almost universal agreement that Geelong in 2011 would beat the Essendon 2000 team. And we're talking like an Essendon 2000 team that was star-studded as well. So they had some serious quality in that team. But that Geelong team was excellent. And for Fremantle to beat them at home by 4 points, wow, that was a really good performance.
I still, I think, though, you said it in the Sydney Freo game, that you wouldn't think that Freo team would come within 2 kicks of winning a grand final the next year, would you?
No, well, we'll get into the game now, but like if we reflect just on week by week, you couldn't believe that particular Fremantle team beat Geelong the week before.
Well, that's true, but you couldn't say at round 2 of 2012 that Sydney were any chance of winning a premiership either. So,
well, their first 2 performances were decent, if not, unremarkable.
Oh, except for the third quarter of this game, but we'll get into that shortly.
Well, I mean, that was remarkable for all the wrong reasons.
Reasons.
Let's kick it off with the game review. Look, Sydney, they ended up winning by 13 points. We're talking about a margin that at one point threatened to be an absolute blowout and a flogging. Should have been a blowout and a flogging. That's just how bad Fremantle were. They were rank for the first 2.5 quarters. Absolutely stank. Josh, you want to give us the Brownlow votes from the match?
Yep, so 3 votes, Josh Kennedy, who was by far head and shoulders the best on ground.
He was excellent.
And it was he was, and it was daylight between him and second, who was Nat Fyfe.
Yep.
Which, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I meant Nat Fyfe for 2 votes. And Lewis Jetta got 1 vote, and I really can't see how they got 1 vote for Lewis Jetta.
It's the Mumford vote from last week. You look at it and you're just like, where the hell did this come from? Okay, he got 3 goals.
No idea. 2 of them were out the backers, though.
Yeah, and one was like a handball over the top.
That's right,
an easy finish.
Running on a ball into space, yeah. Who would you put in for... I mean, I think we'd both put JPK at number 3.
At
3 votes, but what would you put in behind him?
Oh, man, I'd be looking at either Grundy... Malcheski, Johnson, Reid, Smith, any one of those 5.
Yep.
Jack for his first, Jack played 2.5 quarters of just excellent football. But we were talking during the game, remarking on the fact that it's hard to believe that Jetta would be a 45 goal a season player that year based on his performance, but he pops up with 3 goals, and in the end he's got 5-6 goals up to this point.
Yeah.
He just accumulates them.
Yep. I probably wouldn't have Jetta on there at all. I'd probably push. Well, no. I mean, to be fair, I'd probably have to leave Nat Fyfe there because he has to get a vote somewhere. But in 1 vote, I'd have to look at Sam Reid for his first half, or maybe even Aaron Sandilands, because he killed it in the ruck and he kicked a goal and he was pretty dominant wherever he showed up. So But I certainly wouldn't have Lewis Jetta in there.
Well, have a look at this from Malcheski, right? 767 metres gained, 10 rebound 50s. That is just emphatic, okay? And he was pretty damn good all round in defence. He finished with 26 disposals, 7 of them contested, and went at 81%. Okay,
That's a big game.
If we got that from Lloyd, we would be stoked.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. What can I bring up my favourite stat for the whole game? I was going to do it later, we're going to do it now. Seeing you brought up metres gained. The second best metres gained on our team was actually Josh Kennedy with 577, and he had 36 disposals and 10 clearances.
That is ridiculous.
How can you have that many metres gained when you're playing in the guts like that? That has absolutely blown my mind.
22 contested possessions.
The guy's a magician.
I mean, 7 turnovers. He kind of slaughtered on the kicks, but 6 score involvement, 8 marks, 20 pressure acts. Absolutely phenomenal. And he still had 4 tackles.
Phenomenal game.
And 7 rebound 50s. 7.
Phenomenal game.
It was.
Absolutely phenomenal game.
Sam Reid had a really, really good first half.
He was fantastic, wasn't he?
He looked like he was in a mood to dominate. Kicked 3 goals.
Yep.
Until he got a nice little stinger on the shoulder. And then after that, he was pretty much out of it. But even he had over 400 metres gained.
Yeah. And this is one of the, sort of brings up one of the things with watching these old games that, I think it was Dunstall was talking about just how much of a superstar that Sam Reid was going to be. And he was going to be, one of the best tall forwards in the competition. He was going to kick bags of goals. And it's sort of one of those things where you go, gee, these guys, they never really quite got there, did they? And we all know Reedy's story. He just can't, he's never been able to get consistent time on the paddock since his hamstrings started playing up on him. But
yeah,
it's, things that could have been.
Well, you also look at the recruitment of Tippett and Franklin, and he's gone from full forward to suddenly playing on the wing and even having a stint at centre-half back. And you've got a ruck resting in the forward line. When you look at that, you've already got Franklin at centre-half forward. You've got Kurt Tippett in a forward pocket. It's already tall enough. And then you throw Sam Reid back there. You got 4 talls in your forward line. He might be good below his knees, but he's not good enough, or he's not at that quality of a small forward, such as like Eddie Betts was at that time, or even a Hayden Ballantyne, a Jude Bolton, Kieran Jack. These players were absolutely elite below the knees. Could you do that?
Yeah.
So, stints in the ruck, stints in defence, stints on the wing. They tried him everywhere. I mean, they even gave him a go on the ball at one point.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, he's a victim of circumstance there as well, isn't he? But, I guess it goes back to that thing we've talked about for the last 3 years as well, that if Buddy Franklin comes up before Kurt Tippett never wears a Swans jumper.
Yeah. The other thing that's actually really amazing when you think about it, right, is the start of each season Sam Reid's been fit for. He's had a great start. And you can go all the way back to 2017 when we played Western Bulldogs at Etihad. We lost the match narrowly. There was that game when Franklin went ridiculous for 15 minutes, but Sam Reid had 6 goals.
Yeah.
So he has that ability to be a very good quality player. 2018 had a really good start. 2019, another good start, but it gets a few rounds in, and then all of a sudden he's just sort of back to what it is. And we're going to see that in later rounds in 2012.
Pings a hamstring, pings an Achilles. He never really comes back.
Yeah, exactly. Well, his 2012 season was probably his best season. He even looked quality in 2011.
Yeah, that would be the best half of football I've ever seen him play.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't just that he kicked 4 goals, it was that he was actually a complete package up and down the wing as well.
Yeah. And he was absolutely killing McFarlane. McFarlane just had no answer for him. He nailed him. Contested or on the lead, he was just absolutely giving him a caning.
Yep.
And the funniest matchup of the day, Adam McPhee on Adam Goods. McPhee didn't have a touch in the first half. And neither did Stephen Hill, for that matter.
No, that's true. Who'd they move on to Goods in the second quarter? They moved someone on to him, and Goodsy didn't touch the ball all quarter. And then they took the tag off him. And then, Goodsy bobbed up, was pretty influential, kicked 2 goals. One of them was an absolute cracker of a goal.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really weird move from Ross Lyon. I didn't, but I mean, he can quite happily let Goodsy run around on his own, and I'll quite happily watch Goodsy run around on his own.
Yeah, Goods was, he had another one of those in and out matches. When he kind of came into it, he was as influential as any player on the ground. He had an amazing moment in the third quarter that we desperately needed, that resulted in us turning the tide, going 3 goals up instead of being, only 2 goals up or even 1 goal up at that point. There was that massive chase down on LRT on McPhee. And we'll talk about LRT, who is not quick at all against a player who is pretty quick. Chased him down, no awareness, got the ball out. Adam Goods won a massive one-on-one and got the ball in the forward line. We've got to go.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's right. And he probably should have had another goal assist too, but Gary Rowan cocked up the shot at goal, and it turned into a turnover instead of what should have been a certain point. But obviously the best Goods moment of that game was his second goal. Wheeling around onto the left boot, kicked it across his body from 40-ish metres, and the thing lands in the goal square, takes a break, bounces at right angles, and just split the sticks. It was an absolute pearler.
Yeah, that's probably the moment of the day, really. When he's standing there just wishing it through, just swishing his arm in the air, just trying to get the ball to break left. And it did. It was a proper leg break, that one.
Perfectly executed. Was always the plan.
Let's go through some game stats, and then we'll look at Dream Team points, and then we'll give our top 5 for the match.
Yep.
We weren't... See, this is the weird thing, right? We smashed Fremantle for 2.5 quarters. We're up by 46 points.
Yep.
Right.
The game should have been done and dusted.
Exactly. Should have been over at that point. Despite that, we lost nearly every statistical category that there is to win. We had 15 less disposals, 23 less handballs, 38 less hitouts, Josh, 25 to 63. We lost the inside 50 count by 10, 53 to 63. The clearance count by 10, which is no surprise really. Sandilands was impressive, 39-49.
But that losing 10 by 10 clearances when you're getting smashed in hitouts like that, I think that's actually a credit to our midfielders because they never tried to rove off Seaby. They spent the whole game roving off Sandilands. And for the most part, they got it. They did a good job. They did a really good job.
Well, their turnaround really came off the back of some great work from Crowley, from Maine, from Fife, but most importantly from Sandilands, who started getting it to his midfielders. At that point, I think we were pretty even on clearances, centre clearances and around the ground.
And a couple of absolute terrible moments coming out of defence as well. Oh, yeah.
Some massive shanks and massive mistakes. Just mentally sort of kind of tuning out a little bit when you're 46 up. You're just sort of going, the game's already won. And then all of a sudden, in an instant blink and you might miss it, Fremantle, they're just 2 goals down in 6 minutes of play. It was ridiculous how fast they came back into it. But we lost the centre clearance count by 7, 9 to 16. This is the one thing, this stat in particular, this next one, really surprised me. 10 less tackles inside forward 50, 10 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
That just goes to show that Fremantle were desperate when they didn't have the ball. They wanted to lock it in. But our rebound 50s, for the most part, for most of the game, were quality. They just couldn't keep it in there. That was a problem.
Yep.
We had 10 more contested possessions. Thank you, Josh Kennedy. But 32 less uncontested possessions. And we didn't use it well at all. We had 68 to 70% disposal efficiency. So not only did we lose the possession count, we were less efficient with it.
Yep. So, I wouldn't be surprised if those those negative 32 uncontested possessions, whether a lot of that is actually them coming out of their defensive 50 though. A lot of our forward 50 entries in this were, as they are now, pretty brain dead.
Yep.
And that's okay. That's okay if you put pressure on down there and, tackle and lock it in, but we weren't doing that in this game.
No. We didn't have the
players. So
to
just bounce straight back out.
No, we didn't have the players for it in the end.
No, and weirdly, even when we had an outnumber down there, we couldn't get the ball either.
No. And as good as Adam Goods is, he's not a pressure forward. He's not a small forward pressure player.
No, he's not.
So in Fremantle's comeback, they were just bouncing it out of there with impunity. And not only that, we couldn't even get it in there in the end because their midfield was just so on top that we were getting it to maybe 15, 20 metres outside of Fremantle's 50, and they were just putting it straight back in.
He had an outnumber down there. We couldn't get the ball either.
No. And as good as Adam Goods is, he's not a pressure forward. He's not a small forward pressure player.
No, he's not.
So in Fremantle's comeback, they were just bouncing it out of there with impunity. And not only that, we couldn't even get it in there in the end because their midfield was just so on top that we were getting it to maybe 15, 20 metres outside of Fremantle's 50, and they were just putting it straight back in, hitting up targets or just nailing it from long range.
Of course, and while we're trying to match the speed of Freo further down the ground, we ended up putting Benny McGlynn down there, so he wasn't up front making tackles either.
Yeah, and the amazing thing when you get Kepler Bradley, he was very good. There's no going away from the fact that Kepler Bradley was immensely good, and he was one of the main reasons why they even came back into the match. That's how good he was. But you just got to look at some of the forward play, some of the forward craft that they had in that third quarter. You've got Clancy Pearce gets a goal nearly halfway through, and at that point, it was 46 points. Mzungu kind of gets one on the run. Kepler Bradley finally gets a goal for his effort. Chris Mayne bags 2. But we have Kepler Bradley, Chris Mayne, and Chris Mayne, 3 goals in a row. After Mzungu's goal, or pretty much all 4 of those are almost centre clearance goals.
Yeah.
Or centre clearance inside 50, coming out, repeat inside 50's goals. So we got the 18-minute 9-second mark for Mzungu, 19-minute 39-second for Bradley, 21-37 for Chris Mayne, 23-33 for Chris Mayne, and 26-10 for Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson even getting a goal for crying out loud.
Yeah. Second half of the third quarter for us was an absolute train wreck.
It was. And it was Adam Goods' goal, his first of the match, that he got after that massive chase down, got it inside forward 50, bagged the goal. That was the goal that put us 17 points back up. And God, that was a desperately needed margin.
Oh, of course. That rundown tackle from LIT and Goodsy's goal, well, they were the 2 bits that bucked the boys back up again, because we were as flat as a shit carter's hat at that point in time, and we genuinely looked like losing by a good margin.
Well, even the commentary team remarked on the fact that our midfield, I can't remember which one it was. I think maybe Dunstall goes, I don't think Sydney's got their choice midfield in at the moment. It was Parker, Hanbury, and Craig Bird. Now, 2 of those 3 would become mainstays in 2 years' time. But at that point, Hanbury was, in his 2nd or 3rd year of AFL. Parker was in his 2nd year of AFL. Craig Bird wasn't a clearance midfield player. He was a tagger at best.
But he laid 10 tackles, though, so he was doing his job.
He was doing his job.
And even though Hannah's ended up with 5 clearances as well, so he was probably doing his job. But you're right, it looked like a smaller midfield as well at that time, smaller and less experienced, and it showed because they smashed us out of the middle.
Oh, yeah. You got Maine, Mundy, Fife. There's no competing with that.
No, that's right.
They were just running it out. And they had their backs full of run as well, so they were just getting the ball, running it in. It wasn't the fact that they got 6 in a row. It was how fast they got them.
And how easily they got them.
They got them within 8 minutes. Right, when you look at the clock, it was like 5.5 minutes of AFL play. 5 to 5.5 minutes of AFL play. It was 8 minutes real time.
Well, and this is the thing I was saying in the chat bar, that at half time I'm like, this game isn't as bad as I remember it, and then at third quarter time I'm like, this game is worse than I remember it.
Like third quarter blowouts, we've never been particularly great in the third quarters. We see that later on in the season. We have a couple of third quarter failures late in the season, but then in the 2012 grand final, that was Hawthorn's quarter when they bagged 5 in a row and threatened to run away with the match. And
when we finally get to that game, I'll be interested to see how much of that is just because Hawthorn was that good, or because we had a bad quarter, because I don't remember it that well.
I remember it well. Hawthorn
don't wreck it for me.
That good.
La, 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 la.
In this case, I would like to say Fremantle were that good, but God, we were bad.
Oh, we were shite. We were terrible.
And
but they rallied.
It's funny, we say, can you believe Jeddah's going to kick 45 goals? And then you look at that quarter and you're like, how the hell do we even get to the grand final, let alone win it?
But you can also see how Jeddah manages to kick 45 goals this year as well. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he kicks some rippers later in the year. There's no doubt about that. And Adam Goods gets better as the season goes on, and Josh Kennedy is just unstoppable. I think he wins the Bob Skilton that year as well. The planets aligned for us at the right time. We went into the grand final with just minimal amount of injuries. We haven't seen...
Who wins the Brownlow this year?
It was the Joe Watson one.
Oh, for God's sake,
Yeah,
really?
as the one that in the end, Sam Mitchell and Trent Cotchin get awarded.
Yeah, of course, because of the drug thing. But,
Yep.
okay, how does... I'm going to go look at the Brownlow votes when we're done here, because I'll be interested to see where Kennedy end up polling. Because if he plays like this all year, and he's not in the top 3 or 4, it'll be an absolute travesty.
He finishes around 20, between 20 and 22.
What?
Yeah, but this
Okay,
is a
righto.
year when Joe Watson won it with, I think, around about 28 votes.
Yeah,
So
right.
this is this is in a time when 18 to 19 votes will no longer win you the Brownlow. This is a time when if you want to win the Brownlow, you've got to have like 33 votes. Because Gary Ablett Jr. was winning it with like 30 votes, 33. Dangerfield with 32 or 33 or something ridiculous.
Well, Goods, Rashido, and the other bloke, who I can't remember his friggin' name.
Won it on like 19 votes.
Yeah, they didn't have that many votes. Yeah, and I think he only had 22 when he got it in 2006, is that right?
Yeah.
Something like that. It wasn't that many.
No, and now we're talking in the age when from, I think it was about 2011 onwards, when Gary Ablett
Buckley.
was really dominating, you had to score
Buckley
nearly
was the other
30 points in the count to win the medal.
Of course, yeah.
So you could look at Luke Parker a few years ago, right? After about 5 rounds, he had 12 votes. This is the year that Dane Swan won it.
Yeah.
And Dane Swan was red hot favourite. And Luke Parker wasn't really in the count. But like you look at the halfway point, he had 18 or 20 votes or something ridiculous. He ended up winning, I think he was second or third in the count. And he still finished with nearly 30 votes. So the Brownlow's just such a weird medal. Dream Team points. I wanted to raise this because it was, I don't know if you recall much back in 2012, but Dream Team points were the main point or main topic of discussion when people talked about performances of players. Because championship data back then was still new, it was still coming in, like it had only really been recently developed, so some of the information that they had was being fed into Dream Team, so Dream Team by default ended up becoming the measuring stick. Then you had Harold Sun's Supercoach, which was basically the Apple fanboy versus the Google fanboy kind of argument, like, see the Dream Team or Supercoach, Dream Team, Supercoach, who's better? Well, in the end, who gives a shit? It's just a fantasy thing. Both do the same thing. But the interesting thing here was that Josh Kennedy, he was heads and shoulders the best player on the field, and Dream Team confirmed this. But Sandilands and Crowley were the next best. And Sandilands had 124 Dream Team points. If you have a look at his stats, and I'm just not looking at Dream Team stats, but his stats in general, right? It is stunning, absolutely stunning in my mind that he does not get a Brownlow vote. He has a goal, 19 disposals, goes at almost 80%, has over 50 hitouts, 16 contested possessions, 5 marks, 4 of them contested, right? And 3 tackles. How does this guy not get in the Brownlow for this?
I have no idea, and that's why. And like Sandilands is one of the reasons why I'm confused Jetta got a vote.
It's almost like that mentality that the winning team has to have at least 2 of the 3 players in Brownlow votes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they do that with everything as well. I mean, we do it with the Norm Smith, that we give it to the best on ground for the winning team. And this is why
don't bring up the 2005, 2006, please don't.
No, I'm going to bring up 2016 because Josh
Kennedy.
I mean, rose-coloured glasses or not, Josh Kennedy should have gotten the Norm Smith that year. And JJ wasn't even the best player on his own team, so I don't even know how he got it from the Dogs. But
if it wasn't Josh Kennedy, it was Tom Mitchell. Either of those two were clearly the best on the ground that day.
Oh, absolutely.
The only problem was there was a significant cliff drop into the next best Sydney player, which is Hanbury up until three-quarter time.
Yeah, so that's right. So it's turned into the best on ground for the winning team, not just best on ground in a grand final.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all subjective voting. It's not objective voting. If it was objective voting, then it would have definitely been Kennedy, Sandilands, probably Crowley instead of Fife.
Yeah, I could handle that. I quite happily accept that. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, I went and had a look at the points. Right, Fife was the 12th ranked player with 85 points, and Jetta was 19th with 72.
Mm-hmm.
And there was at least 5 other Sydney players before Fife at 12th place.
Yeah.
Which was...
Yeah, and I know Jetta was really visible because of the way he scored his goals, getting out the back and long extended runs on a ball in an open space sort of stuff.
People love that.
And it's really flashy and it gets seen. It's easily seen. Yeah. But I didn't think Jetta he finished off a lot of work, but I don't think he was actually influential in changing the course of a game. I think he polished things off and got noticed because he polished it off. But yeah, I still don't know how he gets a vote.
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. Let's do our top 5 and then we'll finish up with injuries from the match. I'll kick off the top 5, Josh. I think we're both in agreement for the first 2 at least.
Yeah.
5 to Josh Kennedy. There is no one else. Not on either team who got close. 4 to Heath Grundy. It is just, it's so sad to watch him because he was an excellent footballer. Man, I wish I appreciated him more back then than I do rewatching the matches, because I watch him now and it's just like, he was excellent. He was one of our best fullbacks for a bloody long time. Since possibly Paul Roos. 3, Malcheski. He was excellent, gone through his stats already. 2, Johnson. He was one of the best players on the field at one point in the match. Had a few clangers, but his defensive work was outstanding. And I gave 1 to Sam Reid, his first half. But then he got the massive stinger on his shoulder and he couldn't mark the ball after that. Your top 5, Josh?
Same with you, mate. I've got Kennedy first for obvious reasons. Grundy as well. And just back to the Dream Team points thing about, take them in context of whether they do or don't make sense. Grundy was extremely influential and is way down in the Dream Team points thing. So they obviously don't place a number on some of the, or as higher ranking on some of the things that people do, especially defenders, I think, get left out when it comes to points.
No, but his defensive act numbers were absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, of course, but they obviously don't rank highly, though. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. Like, if you look at AFL ratings, Johnson was head and shoulders above Grundy. But and that's the amazing thing. But then you look at his 1%ers, he had 6 1%ers. But did his opposition forward kick a goal?
No, but he also he turned the ball over a few times by foot, which resulted in goals, though. And that's actually ultimately why I didn't have Johnson in my votes, because he was amongst the best on ground in the first half, but he had a stinker of a third quarter.
Wow, yeah, I mean that and the team in general.
Well, yeah, that too, and he is a young punk, so you kind of expect.
Yeah,
it's had Grundy with 4 votes. I had Kieran Jack with 3. He didn't touch the ball as much as I would have liked, but I thought his just general hustle and pressure was pretty damn good. Yep. I had 2 points for Sam Reid. A guy was going to be best on ground up until he got cleaned up and hurt his shoulder. Best half of footy I think I've ever seen him play. Yeah. And I gave 1 vote to Smooch because I thought Smooch did some, again, probably an unsung hero of that game. He just went about his business and got stuff done. But he was one of the few players we had who didn't cock something up later on in the game. He was like the little engine that could. He just kept going.
Well, that defence, man. It's just watching the match again. That defence is just so good to watch. It's an immovable force. And you look at how they got their 6 goals. And it was they took all their best midfielders off. And then Fremantle put all their best midfielders on. And then that was it.
Yep.
And then when it was best midfield head-to-head, Sydney were on top.
Yep.
But it's just amazing rewatching it. Okay, time to finish us off, Josh. Injuries from the match, please.
Sam Reid's shoulder, copped a stinger before halftime, but he played out the game. He didn't look that great though, did he?
No, like he looked great up until that point, but after then it looked like he might have even not just stung it, but even popped it out like a sublax or something like that.
Yeah, he seemed to have problems going for the ball after that.
He couldn't even raise his arm above his head at one point.
No. Well, we'll see if he plays next week. Seaby replaced Mumford in the pre-game. I seem to recall Mumford got injured last week, but I can't remember what it was.
It was a back in the end.
Duffield was off with a rib, and Mellington had a corked leg.
Yeah, Mellington was the sub, I think it was, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was too. That's right. They subbed. They might have subbed Duffield out actually. And Mellington came on, and he only lasted 3 or 4 minutes, and he was off as well.
Dan Hanbury was a substitute for the match, and he came on in the third quarter. He subbed on for Ryan O'Keefe, who made his comeback for the season and had 2 or 3 disposals in an absolute horror show. And it's hard to
I have a
believe.
sneaking suspicion. I'm going to bring this up, actually. I have a sneaking suspicion Jude Bolton was taken off towards the end of the game with a knee injury, because I clearly remember saying that they were down on rotations, and there was a lot of talk in the last 5 or 10 minutes about how tired the Swans were looking.
Well, he was off in the third quarter.
Yeah.
So Rocco came off and then Jude came off not that long after.
Yep.
Well, that's it for this week's review. It was the Swans vs Fremantle round 2 match of 2012 season. The Swans won by 13 points, should have been about 7 or 8 goals. Joshua, thank you so much for coming on and enjoying the season that is and the round that was.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me.